So therefore, we have to always try to kind of distance ourselves from our biases. And that could be because it's a position held by my sheikh. It could be a position held by my school of thought that I'm aligned to. It could be, sometimes it's just opinions.
You get those other questions. Okay, what topic do I write?
So just on that, when you're asking that question, give the sciences its due right. How can I say, I want to write about a topic? Your first question should be, I want to read about this topic. If you're reading widely, you'll find these nuggets of information. And when you find that information, it makes your research that much more richer. And only people that are in the field then appreciate what you've done.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the book review podcast with myself, the host, Muhammad Nadat, and our esteemed and honorable Sheikh, Maulana Dr. Zishan. And today is a special episode because recently our esteemed Sheikh hit a milestone in his life. I don't know how we'd want to phrase it, but I'll call it a milestone. And that is that he's been able to produce a work in Arabic on a very specific topic. And we mentioned it before that he had in the works and it was in production. He was doing the research and doing the writing and the editing. And now it's finally come out and it's available to purchase in Ismail Books.
Not yet.
Not yet.
It depends when this comes up.
Depends when it comes out.
When this episode comes out.
Oh, it depends when this episode comes out. So it may be available when this episode comes out. It's not available yet as this episode is being recorded. But this is the kind of place where we're going to start, and we want to talk a bit about the process of doing that research, doing research in general for any other aspiring researchers and writers out there who want to also produce works of their own in any Islamic field. And here I'm going to bring in our Sheikh and ask the question here. What was the reason for publishing the book that you published, and what would be a reason to publish a book?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmadu wa salli wa nusallim ala rasulih al-kareem. Amma ba'd. So, I first want to, I did the episode that we're doing right now. I don't want to do it as a review of of the book because it would be strange reviewing your own book. That will let other people review the books. But I thought it would be a good chance to speak a bit about the process in writing. And of course, we talk about what the book's about. But the main thing is about the process of writing a publication, the idea of different types of research, from the very core of how to come about with an idea. So just briefly, just to get the book out of the way, what that's about, it's a very niche topic. So if anyone wants to or watches the second episode that we did on the Mawsu'ah, the encyclopedia of the ahadith of Imam Abu Hanifa, I mentioned some of the issues with the Mawsu'ah, the encyclopedia. So the positives, and I mentioned some negatives. Some of the, what we call mulahadat, some of the problems that we have with the Mawsu'ah, or that I had with the Mawsu'ah, I have written that up into, it was initially an English article before the Mawsu'ah, and then it was translated to Arabic, and then that is published. So the idea is, behind it is, one of the key sources for the ahadith of Imam Abu Hanifa, is that a reliable source or not? So as I mentioned, it's a very niche topic, something which has had very little attention to, and especially the way that it's been approached. So it's a bit different to common books that come out, right? So it's a bit different like that to what a person usually expects. So that's why the audience who's listening, unless you're really much into the field of hadith and then specifically this topic, it will interest you. But for a wider audience, if someone asks, like, what's the implications of this to do with fiqh or something, and it doesn't have much implication to do with that. But those who are interested in this very specific topic of the ahadith of Imam Abu Hanifa and some of the sourcing for that and these books, then I hope to think there's some sort of contribution that's been made there that has not been made before. So that's in a nutshell what the book's about. I'll talk about how we got there, but the idea, but we can kind of expand upon that, and I'll touch upon the book itself from the process of an idea and to the publication. So we can use it as like a blueprint, and then we'll discuss a whole host of different things as we go ahead.
Okay, so Inshallah. Let's take this back then. right to the beginning of the book, and take us through what was the first moment in which you had a light bulb go off above or within your head, saying, "Ooh, this is an idea."
Yeah, and that's very important. So the question is, how does one come about with an idea? So if we first generalize it and then come back to the specific topic at hand, I think one of the ways of research that usually takes place, so if you're going to go down the route of either a master dissertation or a PhD even to some degree, although you have more time there, or let's say you're studying in madrasa and the ustad wants you to do a dissertation or an iftar course, you want to do whatever it is, right? In those settings, what usually happens is that the teacher or you yourself think of an idea. So you have to kind of sit there and think of an idea and then start to write about it. And you usually have like a time frame. The problem with that is, although many good works and articles do come from that, but if you're still in your early years of studying, well, I mean, like just graduated or near the end or have graduated for a number of years, but you're still in your early years of study, it is very, to really do justice to a topic becomes very difficult because you're still trying to learn the trade, if that makes sense. You're still trying to make sense of what are the books in a given field, and what do I need to read, what don't I need to read. And then you also realize a few other aspects I'll touch upon later. But so that type of research, the results that come from that, especially from a relatively new researcher, scholar, you'll find that a lot of those studies are not the greatest studies. I mean, they could be decent, but in terms of actually contributing to the field, it will be very difficult because you're limited in time and you spend your time just going through what the current material out there is. So it's hard, not impossible, but it's hard to produce groundbreaking or contribute to a field.
You're kind of doing like a extended literature review in order to find out.
That's all time you have. So if I said to you, like, okay, Moran, I want you to do a research on what's the ruling of, okay, let's see, I'll give this to you. What's the ruling of photography in Islam? Right? And I want you to write a dissertation on this. You've got about 3 or 4 months. Now, it's going to take you most of that time just reading up what's been said. And then you kind of got a time to kind of write that up. So what ends up happening most of the time is that your research, which could be decent, will be more of a jama'. It's just a compilation of the current material out there, and then maybe you come with your conclusion. And that's good. And a lot of research is that, and there's nothing wrong with that per se. But then there's another type of research which usually stems, which is quite naturally, which is that you're basically reading, you're studying quite wide. And as you're doing that in any given field, you start to notice that, oh, there's this topic that no one seems to be discussing. So this comes much more naturally. It's not a, if you want to use the word, indigenous idea. It's like, it's kind of stemmed naturally from your process of research and reading, rather than someone telling you to go research this. So then usually that research that stems from that has more meaningful impact because you've kind of noticed certain gaps and you're trying to fill in those gaps. That's when you have usually this higher tier of research. And that can sometimes take years. It could be less than that, but it's just something that comes to your natural research. So that's why what I would say that if anyone is wanting to find topics to research about, yes, you can go and ask someone and say, what topics would you advise me for? And that would be good. But the one that comes from yourself, where you're reading far and wide and you notice that topics have been left untouched, or there's massive goals or holes, massive holes in certain discourses, and you fill that in, that is a research which actually contributes to a field. So when you go back to, and I've always been a bit averse to writing things where there's already something written on. So if you come to me and you say to me, why don't you write about, let's say, photography, whatever it is, right? If I've come across a book, an article that does the job, I'll just say, read that book. Unless I'm doing it as an exercise just to see what I can find, or if I do find something that is relevant, at best I might write it into a small article or post and say, this is something that I found, which is like a nugget of information. But unless I see that there is, massive gaping holes that require to be filled, there's no need for me to carry out, I would say, research. I'm not into that. That's personally, right? But you still need people doing so, because why? I might be jumping all over the place, but hopefully it makes sense at the end of this, right? Because I'm not trying to downgrade or I'm talking about my personal preferences and why other type of research, even though I don't do, I see the benefit of, is that you may have a topic, but you writing or rewriting on that topic is going to bring with you your own flavor, your own style, your own method. So someone who is not aware of that topic, or aware of these books, but the way you present it has your uniqueness to it. And that's why many of the books of the past, even ulama, a lot of it's just a compilation of previous material.
Yeah.
But the uniqueness is the presentation of it. So that itself is a style, that itself is a contribution. But if you were to say, okay, which points have they added that was not added before, you may not find much. But it's the presentation which is significant. So these are all, me personally, I'm not into doing that myself. So therefore, I'll go into why later as well a bit more. But so this idea that we're talking about of Imam Abu Hanifa's hadith was that I had read far and wide this discussion and debate, either when people discuss it in class or in books, that Imam Abu Hanifa had a lot of hadith that he narrated. And then there was the debate that the other point, which was he had very little hadith. What we also all agreed upon was that the Kitab al-Athar of Imam Muhammad and Imam Abu Yusuf, they are the most authentic and earliest compilations of the ahadith of Imam Abu Hanifa. Some even suggesting that this is actually the book of Imam Abu Hanifa and the Imam Muhammad and Abu Yusuf did a riwayah of it. It's a position held by Abu al-Wafa al-Afghani. He argues for it in his muqaddimah of his edition of Kitab al-Athar, Imam Muhammad. And others have also argued for that position. Whatever the case, that was considered the most. But if you open up the book, one thing you notice is that most of the narrations are actually from Ibrahim Naka'i. And the prophetic reports or the qawl of Ashab Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam are not the dominant in it. And then you have some, and the whole purpose behind the book is quite easy to know, is that it's a book of fiqh. So he's not interested in just doing jam' of what the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said in general. It's about those hadith and aqwal which are relevant to certain fiqhi masail. So that's what Imam Abu Hanifa is that's what's compiled Imam Abu Hanifa there. But then you have later on these massive compilations that mention so many hadith, specifically by an individual called Abu Abdullah al-Harithi. We wrote a book called Musnad al-Imam al-A'zam. And this Musnad al-Imam al-A'zam has, we're talking about thousands of narrations, 2 or something thousand he has altogether in it, where he provides well-known hadith, which are in Bukhari, Muslim, from other routes, but he has asanid of those hadith going back to Imam Abu Hanifa. And this book, which is a very large work, gets quite far. It's quite appealing, you can imagine. It was used by Imam Khwarizmi in his book Jami' al-Masanid, which was one of the a super compilation of the hadith of Abu Hanifa. And then later on, it was utilized by many Hanafi scholars for various purposes, which I highlight in the book. But one thing that, and then on the same other spectrum, is that this individual, Abu Abdullah al-Harithi, was discarded by the Muhaddithun. So you look what the Muhaddithun said they had, discard him as a narrator. So what do you do in a situation? All these Hanafi scholars accepted him. Not all, there are some exceptions that have questioned him, right, in amongst the Hanafis, which I know. But you have all these Muhaddithun saying he's discarded. How do we reconcile between this, or who's right here? So what I was trying to look at was, can we somehow look at this musnad and see which side is correct? Right? And furthermore, if Abu Abdullah al-Harithi is trustworthy himself as a narrator, what's the deal with his sanad back to Imam Abu Hanifa? And I found that very few people had done this analysis. So some books I mentioned in the past, and this as well, where I criticized them for not doing this. What was the sanad that he uses? What's the level of that? So what I did was I took a section of the Muslim Imam al-A'zam of al-Harithi, and I studied the hadith, section hadith by hadith, and I tried to demonstrate a pattern, and the conclusion is that it's not a trustworthy source. That's it, in essence, right? Does it have significant consequences? In some degrees, it's to certain works, it has significance, but does it have a significance to the whole way that we approach hadith? No, not really. But it does have significance in how we approach certain books written, like commentaries on this masanid, or how we claim that something is written by Imam Hanifa.
How we approach the general issue.
The issue is, I would say, has been, I haven't seen anything like this written, except recently another book came out of a guy called Sayyid Mamdouh, which, although the book is just come out now, which is about the Mustanid Abu Hanifa. But the content of it was found in an earlier book of his, which I do mention in the work. And there's a section where I criticize Sayyid Mamdouh as well in a footnote. I criticize him, but that's a different topic. But that's in a nutshell what the work is about.
Yeah.
But how I get to it, yeah.
So I remember this as well, like the process. I remember this discussion coming up, and around the same time, the Mawsu'a was also released, at which point we actually reviewed it in the podcast,
Yes.
right? And that was one of the main things that was a sticking point, that yes, we are happy that we can find these ahadith supposedly attributed to Imam Abu Hanifa to the Prophet ﷺ in Bukhari, Muslim, and his authentic works, but the sanad of attributing it to Imam Abu Hanifa has no tahqiq done on it.
Yeah.
And it's just an assumed fact that it is correctly attributed to him. And that was where the gap was.
Yeah.
And that came through, number one, as you mentioned, the extended reading of this topic.
Yeah.
Just so I'm summarizing for people, right? Just an extended reading of the topic. And then also like an understanding or seeing that gap whilst doing that extended reading. And I think that's one of the main requirements for someone who wants to get into this kind of thing, is we can't know the gaps in a particular subject without reading the literature. And I think in academia they do this. They make you read a literature review or some kind of literature review before you start your topic, to see what's out there, what's not out there, what can you fill in, and what can you analyze further.
Yeah. There's actually, when you carry out research, so this is a question that I get asked all the time, right? That I want to do research, what shall I do? The fact of the matter is that there are, I don't know how many, you can say tens, if not hundreds of ways in which you can write something. Meaning there could be certain purposes of what you're trying to do. And each one has its benefits. What I would say, a few things, or one important thing that I want to highlight, and I was talking about why I'm a bit reluctant to write up stuff on when there's already content out there. The reason being is because now we're living in a time where information is accessible. Commentaries are accessible. So if I've taken up a topic where you can easily access other materials. So if it was like the case where I've got my library, no one else has access to books. Like in the past, there was times like this where very few people, even scholars, were limited in terms of access. They had certain books, and there was those scholars that had access. So when they are basically going through commentaries and providing relevant quotations, that's a massive help for you because you don't have access to those works. So for example, if I'm writing a commentary, just something as simple as this, I think I mentioned this before earlier, but let's just mention this again. So if new audience, right, is that let's say I say to you, I write a commentary of Sunan Abi Dawud, for example. But what I do is every hadith in Sunan Abi Dawud, which is in Bukhari or mentioned something similar in Bukhari, I provide what Ibn Hajar says about that hadith from Fathul Bari. So what I've done is I've taken all the hadith in Sunan Abi Dawud in which there is some relevant discussion, or the hadith found in Bukhari, and taken Ibn Hajar's commentary and added that to my commentary of Sunan Abi Dawud. If I did that now, would there be worth to this book?
Not much.
Not much. You can get publications still. You probably look nice and someone could look at it and say, good on you, you know, you put this stuff together. But you can get Fathul Bari is accessible anyway. So although I've done something, and yeah, it's helped a person. If I was teaching Sunan Abi Dawud, it's helped me because I don't have to keep on looking back at it. There is some worth to that work. So it's not none of these works I would say are worthless, but I don't see that there's not that going to have that much significance of it. But if I did this 100 years ago, that would be a significant work. And there's actually a number of these kind of books that are written like these kind of commentaries of books of hadith. Famous example is Tuhfat al-Ahwadi of Imam Abdul Rahman Mubarakfuri, where he heavily relies upon 3 or 4 sources. The Fathul Bari in his commentary Tirmidhi, Fathul Bari, Sharh Sahih Muslim Nawawi, Nail al-Awtar, and I think there's one other work, right? Heavily relies upon this. Rather, there's been studies to show that large parts of it are just quotations from there. Now, we can look back at that and say, well, what kind of work is this? But that's not true, because when Mubarakfuri was writing his commentary, that was a hefty task. Because you got Tirmidhi hadith, I can't search it up.
You have to find it manually.
I need to find that, see if it's relevant, take something out from there, from Sahih Muslim, take it out from there, the commentary, nail al-tar, find something relevant in their other parts and put that together. That's not an easy task. If someone said that to me, do that manually, it would be a long, hefty task.
A lot of man hours.
But that same commentary now is not going to have the same worth because you say, I can use Fathul Bari.
Yeah.
So every type of research has its benefit, but how great a benefit is or how less it is, one has to kind of consider the situation that you're in. So if you're trying to contribute to ulum, that's a different ball game. If you're trying to write something for students, that's different. If you're trying to write something for yourself that others can benefit from, that's different. Whatever you're trying to do, right, there is a scope for that, but you shouldn't get confused between these. Like saying, I'm trying to contribute, but what you're doing, I'm just quoting stuff from other places.
You're writing a madkhal.
Exactly, you're writing a madkhal is a good example, right? And even then, as I mentioned last time, in the madkhal Sahih Bukhari, a madkhal can be a contribution.
Yes.
So we done the Bayt Sunnah edition as a madkhal, but the madkhal is a significant contribution. So we'll discuss what contributions are in a minute, but that's something that needs to be highlighted because I don't think a lot of the works that are being produced, there's a term they use which is called tasweedu sahifa, which means blackening of the pages. What that means is that because even like something as simple as I'm writing a quotation in the past manually, that's still quite a bit of work. I sometimes do this with some of the students in my classes that, you know, like I'm not going to mention books like this, just be unfair if I just call out books, right? But there's certain books that have been written that I look at and I'm saying, this is a 10-minute task. And I can see some of the students a bit perplexed. Like, I go, okay, let's do this, right? And I'll share screen, so they can have the screen in front of them on Zoom. And I'll open a Word document and I'll say, okay, what's the book about? So let's say it's getting entries of certain people, right? So I was like, all right, I go on Shamila, they can see it. I click on certain books of Rijal, of narrators and history, right? I find those entries and I copy and paste. And I tend to time it. And sometimes within the scope of 6-7 minutes, right? Because I reference at the bottom as well, I have a 10-11 pages done. Right? And I say, if you give me a week, this will be ready for publication. So does those books have no worth? No, make the most of what's around you, but these are not going to be long-lasting contributions because anyone's getting access to the same material, the same thing now. So if you want to make contributions to sciences, that's a different ball game. And we'll talk about some of those works like that, inshallah, right? But it's two different things.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And I think that's where you get those other questions. Okay, what topic do I write? Because people have not thought about that, and that's the first struggle they come across, the first hurdle they come across in that sense, right? And I just saw
so just on that, when you're asking that question, give the sciences its due right. How can I say, I want to write about a topic? Your first question should be, I want to read about this topic.
Yeah.
Right? And the problem is that sometimes people are very eager and they want to jump straight to research, or when I say research, I mean in terms of writing, writing will come after. You want to be able to read about a topic. You read about a topic, and then when you come across gaps, then you say, do I have the ability to fill in that gap? So if, for example, there's a debate and discussion, and the debate and discussion brings me into Jahili poetry. Jahili poetry is not something that I think I can provide any meaningful contribution to. So that means I can't do it. That's my ability restricts me from doing it. Whatever I'm going to write about Jahili poetry now is just going to be a quotation from someone else.
Yeah.
So I can't do much here. So I'll ask and try to get answers from other people. I can't. So you have to then also know where your limitations are. So what happens is sometimes, and there'll be some examples in the future that we will give, where a person takes up a research task, but the research task is resulting in them, for example, going into the field of hadith, but they don't know isnad. So then they kind of come across a hurdle. Is like, okay, but this is part of my research project. So then they will just delve into it, they'll dabble into it, and they'll start making huge blunders. A person is into a field of lugha, but then a certain mas'ala comes up and it doubles into fiqh.
You see this a lot in academia.
Of course, because it's very limited in terms of, because you're trying to be a polymath with this kind of type of research. So you have to know your limitations. What you can not, just because there could be topics that I would have wanted to research 10 years ago that I just couldn't do. Some of them I could do now, some I still can't. So some I still require some years of looking into the topic and then feeling comfortable saying, okay, you know what? this is not talking about contributions here, guys. This is just be clear here, right? Talk about when you're trying to contribute to a science, which is that a topic has not been discussed, has not been thoroughly investigated, right? I'm not talking about the foundations of Islam, obviously, right? We're talking about topics that have not been investigated on some aspect of a science, Islamic science. Then you require sometimes patience to wait, read, absorb, and then see if you have the ability to write something meaningful here. And you don't always have that ability.
And I guess it starts off by, like we mentioned, doing the reading. And I think a lot of times just doing the compilation of that literature, making your own notes, that's when a person starts to see gaps in the literature itself.
And there's a laziness to us, which is that I want things dictated to us, to me, to say, all right, Ustad, read this book. When you finish that book, then read this book. When you've done that, read this article. And then when you do that, then write this research. It doesn't work like that.
And the irony is they won't read it.
If you have to say they won't read it anyway, I've had this conversation a lot of times. Can I have a syllabus to read this thing? And you spend a long time telling them what to read, and then a few months later, they've not done anything, right? So I'm reluctant to actually give lists of books. You say, hey, read this if you get it, and we talk the next book after you're done with that. But that is where we want to have someone that's kind of guiding us throughout the whole process. Well, if that's the case, let the Sheikh do the research. If I have to sit with you the whole way and take you every step, and say, you know what, you stay there. Let me just do it, right? You have your teachers as guides that help you and then nudge you in rightful directions. But at the end of the day, you need to tread that path of starting to open books up, read widely if you want to be contributing to a science. If you don't want to be contributing to a science, there's nothing wrong with that. But just understand that then your style of books, what you're trying to produce, is going to be a different genre. It's a different genre of research you're looking at now. It's just jama', tartib, tahdhib, right? Trying to organize material,
or even
compile it, and then you may want. And so, if you are starting out on this journey of research, you shouldn't be starting, as I mentioned, to the elm of contribution. You want to start off with, okay, let me compile. Let's see what people have said. Let me look at this point and write a footnote. So I've compiled what this sheikh has said, but I've mentioned some meaningful footnotes. I've given some insights. And then that would expand. And you find a lot of actually the senior scholars, this is what they do. They start off with ta'liqat, which are notes, etc. They will publish books. So they will get like an Arabic text and they will kind of type it up and they will do tahqiq of it and they'll publish it with their footnotes. They might start doing takhrij of hadith. So hadith is there, they'll analyze the sanad and tell you where it is.
That forces you to access the literature that you need to access.
And as you're doing that, what happens is you then start seeing, oh, there's this part that the sheikh doesn't respond to. And so you might write a ta'liq saying this requires further research or whatever. And then that would then maybe expand into a book. So this is how this thing actually works. I'll give you, so just some background to my PhD dissertation, which is being rewritten right now, is on the topic of Deoband and internal differences in Deoband. So I'll just tell you the process behind this, the story behind it, right? So I graduate from madrasa, alim course, and when I say to have no idea what Deoband is or who the Deobandi ulama are, it's not an understatement. Meaning I knew names, right? So you knew the name Ashway Tanwi, Allama Kashmiri, you know these names, right? And maybe odd books here and there, but it's nothing that I fully, was immersed in anything. I go to do my master's, and in the library there, I came across a book by Muhammad Qasim Zaman, which is called Ulama. I'll put the pictures up. Ulama in Contemporary Islam, Custodians of Change. I think that's the name of the book. And in it, he discusses the differences between Maulana Hussein Ahmed Madani and Maulana Ashway Thani, more specifically Maulana Zafar Ahmed Usmani. It is I'la Sunan, about composite nationalism. Right, this idea that are Muslims and Hindus one qawm, or should we be seen as two different? So the International Congress said that we should work together, and the Tanwi and Camp said no, we should be separate. Whatever the debate is, right? So when I looked at, and some of the language is quite harsh, right? And this ikhtilaf, the first time I saw it in their own words, it kind of, this is not what I expected it to be. It's a bit different to what I expected. And there's stuff in here that I heard about, but I didn't really see. And it started to intrigue me, saying, okay, if they differed on this, which is quite a significant issue politically, what else do they differ on? So I heard stuff. So that started to, explore other topics. So I went to the topic of taqleed and ijtihad. So how do they present topic taqlid ijtihad? Number one, in contrast to the tradition before, so the inherited tradition from the classical scholars, and then internally, are they all the same? And you start seeing, okay, there's clearly a view here, but there are, significant differences in how they approach certain questions. Even in the fatwa, how strict some of them follow certain position in the madhab, how lenient in other cases people are in following certain opinions.
Surprisingly so.
At that time, it's surprising. So then that turns into my dissertation, my main dissertation. Then when I get to go into a PhD, I thought, well, let's expand this into other babs, other sections, other topics. So this process that I went through was reading a single book that intrigued you, and then that kind of widens the reading, and say, okay, there's such something here. Gets into one dissertation, goes into a PhD, now it's been written into a book, inshallah. So this is how this journey comes about, and the book that's being written now is written through the lens of how to deal with ikhtilaf in the ummah from an academic perspective, right? So from a legal perspective, how do we deal with ikhtilaf? So from starting out at this place, how it kind of goes all this kind of journey to the current conclusion you have now. That would not have happened if someone said to me, why don't you write a topic on this book? Right? Why don't you write a book on this topic? It wouldn't work like that. So you have to have this kind of natural process that you go through until you get to this end result.
Definitely. And I just on this as well, right? So that's we've understood here that in order to get topics to research, it's not much about asking and getting a guide to hold your hand through the whole thing, but it's an organic process through reading and analyzing. And obviously you get a guide who will show you where you need to go, but that journey ultimately has to be taken by yourself. Now, what are some issues that a person may come across when attempting to research in general and also research to contribute to a field? What are some issues that a person comes across?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the issue you have is that number one is if you don't know, actually, let's start with the first practical thing, right? We are a lot of students of knowledge, right? We're very reactive. It's natural because we're part of the community. So you're part of the community, you're meant to be discussing all things that are happening. So right now, you may go to do your class, a student will ask you saying, Ustad, what do you make of Iran? Right? How do you deal with that? So now you're like, I have to answer this question. So now it's like, okay, what's happening in Iran? You go online, everyone's talking about Iran. So now you're trying to work out, so you're all focused on that. You think, I have to research this. You may open up a book. You get a quarter into the book and no one cares about Iran anymore. Right? Now people are asking about, Ustad, there's this guy who said this comment. What do we make of this? And this topic could be about some abstract fiqh issue. So, okay, let me put my fiqh cap on. Now I'm going to go look into this topic. And you start reading up, unless you have no shame, you can just give answers without research, right? But I'm assuming that we have some sort of, sanctity for ilm, right? So you're going to go back, open a book up again. You get a quarter into it, you think, I can formulate an answer. You come back, now we don't care about that anymore. We're actually debating this issue now. And so what happens is you end up having like 1,000 projects just left hanging saying, oh yeah, I did look into that once upon a time. So one of the things you require when you want to come through to an idea to the end is perseverance. You have to continue this project and just shut the world off. Doesn't mean you don't engage, but you have to be dedicated to your project. So I mean, you dedicate a certain amount of hours or something to it. That's practically, and that's very hard. The best, I've seen students, scholars, they struggle with this because it's just very difficult just to keep yourself motivated, especially when no one else cares anymore. There's that initial boost you have. I'm going to do it. But if it's like there's certain type of research which can be a lot of pages, but they're quite quick. So if once you learn, for example, how to do tahqiq of isnads and takhrij, especially with the sources you have now, you can give me 2-3 days and you can write up a relatively significant tahqiq of a hadith if you know what you're doing because of the access of sources. And you give me a few weeks, that could turn into a 40-50 page and it can turn longer. You know what you're doing if that's what happened, right? So you can get away with it. But if you're trying to do like a long-term, meaningful research of, finishing off a task.
If someone wants to give you multiple volumes to do tahqiq of, for example.
If you're doing that, that's if you're doing tahqiq of a text. Yeah. But that's one. You're doing tahqiq of a text. But if you're taking a topic that requires much more thought, it can get tiring and it's hard to maintain that. That's number one. Number two issue you have is, I mentioned before, is you get stuck. Right? Like you come across a topic and think, I don't know how to answer this. I don't know how to articulate this. I don't feel confident to give an opinion on this. So then sometimes you have to kind of shelf certain ideas. Now, if that idea is pivotal, that study is pivotal to your research, and then you may have to say, you know what, I'll put it to the side. And there's no harm in doing so. You have these projects and you say, this was pending upon this, I couldn't solve it. And then you can come back to that later. And they have many examples of scholars that have started a work and then they come back to it years later, right? It's just left there. And then you come back to it and think, you know what, I need to formulate into an article now or book form. These are practical issues you usually come across.
Or what happens as well, like this is something we've experienced personally, like where things we're discussing, and as we're reading a completely different thing, or we're reading about something completely different, a point related to a separate project appears.
Yeah.
And then you're building your kind of what you can say portfolio of what you have on this side.
Yeah.
But you're not really actively doing the research for it. It's just coming about during your general reading. And that's something that really helps, I guess.
I tell you why that's better, and that's when you come to the issue of contribution a bit more, right? Is that when you are so focused in on just doing a research on a topic, you're usually going to be looking at the sources that are going to discuss that topic.
Yeah.
Right? So what do I mean by this? Is that, let's say I gave you a topic to do with, let's stick with photography, as I mentioned before, right? So what you're going to do, you're going to say, I'm going to look at the hadith, commentaries of the hadith, and books of fiqh, right? And that's fine. But there could be, then you're going to do that, right? So you're going to look at so what you're going to do first, you're going to look at the hadith, the famous hadith about tasweer, and then you're going to look at the commentaries under that. You're not going to look at random other hadith, right? So it's possible there could be another discussion, because remember the rationale behind the prohibition of tasweer is mudahat bi khalqillah, is imitating Allah's quality of creating. But that could be related to another bab that you're not aware of, and because you're not studying tasweer, that's not part of it, you may miss out on useful comments and statements that are related to your topic, but you are not aware because you are focused on where you will look at the sources itself.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have this kind of broader reading, what that allows you to do is it allows you to pluck information. And that's what I would say is the difference between a caliber of like a muhaqqiq, like a proper scholar that can do proper tahqiq, and in contrast to like a newer scholar that's trying to engage in research, is that person will usually stick to the places where you expect to find stuff. But that muhaqqiq, when they write something, right, you can see that this guy has been reading very vastly. You find it like people like Sheikh Awama, you read his tahqiq, Sheikh Hatim, right? You read his tahqiq. These ulama, when they are writing on a topic, contemporary scholars here for a second, right? You can see that they are citing sources you thought, man, I would never have found that. All right? There's this, there's a famous book called Fadail Abi Hanifa by Ibn Abi Awam. So there's a debate about his death date. Now, when did he actually die? So there's a video of Sheikh Hatim, I'll upload it on the channel, inshallah. There's a video of Sheikh Hatim where he discusses this, and he finds that this Ibn Abi Awam was narrating an incident of him where he's narrating hadith later than the death date given by the muhaqqiq of the kitab. But the reference, I believe, was to a book on the tabaqat of Nahw or something like that, right? Now, if you're asking me, and I was to research this topic, I wouldn't have found, unless some sort of search engine and came across it, but that wouldn't have been amongst my reading. I would look at the Baqat Hanafi books, and I would say, unfortunately, I couldn't really find anything. But if you're reading widely, you'll find these nuggets of information. And when you find that information, it makes your research that much more richer. And only people that are in the field then appreciate what you've done. Right? Yeah. For the untrained eye, it looks the same. One tahqiq, that tahqiq, what's the difference? But for the trained person, they'll appreciate this kind of what's happening here. And others don't understand it. Like, why are you so saying this guy's, what's he done so significant? Other people have written books on this topic, right? But when you see the level of tahqiq, then you appreciate what's taking place. And that is a result of wide reading to your research projects, right? And then you kind of come out with this very rich research when you eventually do it, rather than a standard rehash of the material you kind of seen already. No harm in that, but you're not contributing to the science if that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah. So here we understood that it should be something that's a lifelong kind of task, or these multiple projects. It's not something that's, I need to finish this project in 3 months, and in 3 months I can't find anything, then I'm never going to attempt it again. It's a lifelong thing in which you're doing wider reading to compile your notes and your literature on a particular
It's a marathon, it's not a sprint.
It's a marathon. And once you've got the enough content or enough knowledge on a particular topic after years of reading and researching and reading on the wider topics, you're able then to put it into a form where you can convey it to others in the manner that you've learned it, or better than what you've read. Any kind of issues that you specifically found? Because when you're, and this is something which people struggle with when it comes to contributions, is that if you're writing on a particularly niche topic, such as the topic you wrote on, or any other topic that there is no blueprints or there's no one doing it before you, then you're working in the dark. You're working blind in the sense that you're still finding the correct way of doing what you're doing. So that's an issue. So and I'm not sure to what extent that was the issue for yourself.
No, it's a very good point.
How would you circumvent that?
Yeah, it's a very good point. One thing that I struggle with, and I think a lot of people struggle, especially those who study madaris, unless you're naturally gifted with this, but I struggle with writing in general. Meaning, if you want to write a post or something that's different, but trying to formulate like a longer type of string an argument together and keep yourself in a certain style, etc., and to articulate yourself, it's something that I think I struggle with, and doesn't come naturally to me. So therefore, when it comes to formulating arguments, is not an issue. So if you're asking me personally, right, if I was to formulate a cohesive argument, I find that to be relatively straightforward. Some people struggle with that. But for me, the issue is the actual write-up of it. How can I write it up? Because I write the way I think, and that can sometimes not be the most conducive to a reader. So I need sometimes heavy editing to try to make more sense of it. That's point number one. Number two is very much so. So when you're writing these kind of works or points where there's not much on. So I was trying, you have a discussion of khilafah. How do we conceptualize the idea of khilafah? Especially with very specific movements calling for revival of khilafah. What does khilafah mean, right? So there are books in Arabic, there's some, but they don't touch upon the very specific questions that were being asked in the West. So when I was trying to approach this discussion, or let's say voting again, there are many articles and books written in Arabic that you can approach, but the specific questions about voting that when I wrote it back in madrasa days, right, it was they're very specific arguments, and you won't find a lot of those responses in the Arabic. So again, you're doing the same thing. And this is what I like to kind of engage in rather than just copy and pasting, trying to actually engage in these discussions directly. And it is very difficult. So the way you have to kind of formulate this, in my opinion, is you throw out your argument, not in public, meaning you write up your argument, and then you have to get advice from peers. So people that you look up to, you have to do munaqasha, you have to debate with them, right? And say, look, this is my argument, what do you think? That person will turn around and say, it's great. So, okay, that's one person. What do you think? What do you think? And one of the things that I had a lot of trouble with the Arabic was, number one, I've never written Arabic before. So I already have, I think, a bit of issue writing in English, right? Not the English part, like I said, just the articulation part. And especially the editing process, I think most people find that
a good read you're talking about.
Yeah, to make it like that, yeah. So I'm saying I can put all the facts in front of you, but to make it a smooth reading, I personally find that I struggle a bit in trying to do so. Then I'm trying to do an Arabic now, and on a topic where can't just quote my way out of it, it can be quite difficult. You're trying to formulate a specific argument. So what I did was, I first wrote it up. It was very poorly written, but it basically was the argument that I wanted to make. It was about 100 pages, something it was at that time. Then if you recall, I got you and a few other guys to come together, and we read through it. Just took out some of what I thought were glaring errors. So we kind of read through it. But even then, because none of us are Arabs and are not, Arabic articulation hasn't come naturally to us, a lot of the passages, there was grammar stuff, but there's also a lot of, it didn't read smoothly. So alhamdulillah, before we actually, just to explain this point, so I got Maktab Ismail in contact and said, this is my idea. So they kind of asked about the idea and go, this is what I'm going to do. So we wrote it out, went through it. And then the Maktab Ismail have one of the sheikhs in Medina. So he reads through it and he kind of corrects, the grammar and stylistic stuff, and he asks certain questions. Not so much about the content of the paper, of the book itself, but more to do with stylistic issues. So in terms of Arabic, I use standard Arabic, because what is, if you're going to publish something in Arabic with the publisher, they would usually sort out the typesetting and font for you. So alhamdulillah, I didn't have to focus too much on that. I just had basic Arabic keyboard, and I was just typing up like that, right? I would also advise people that if you're going to use Arabic keyboard, get the Arabic stickers and just helps you out, right? For the keyboard. So when I sent it to them, they sent it back saying, okay, we've kind of rectified it, made it read a bit better. And in my mind, when I was reading, I thought this reads quite well. So then I sent it to, I was like, okay, it might be ready for publication. So then I asked one of my friends who was studying, was graduate from Azhar, and when he read it, he goes, look, there's certain stylistic issues here. Some of the grammar is a bit off. It doesn't read smoothly. And I thought, oh shoot, I was going for publication right now, right? So then he said a few things. Then I have a very good friend, Mona Haroon, who, alhamdulillah, said, I'll check it out. All right, I'll go through it. So he went through it, and he helped significantly in terms of the stylistic issues of it. Again, alhamdulillah, he didn't mention any significant issue with the argument of the book. So that I was happy with. So that, from the beginning, I had a bit of contentment that, okay, the argument is solid. It's just about how do I present it. So he was very helpful. Like a lot of, even minor issues. He goes, you don't have to change this, but you can start it this way, reword it. Because he had studied at Al-Azhar, his Arabic was much more fluent in terms of writing as well. Mm-hmm. So he helped significantly in that. So when the changes were made then, it read very smoothly. But again, I had this issue where there wasn't any, I can say, expert on the field that had, reread through it and said, give me the thumbs up. I got thumbs up from other people, but not from someone that was like an expert in the field. So when we went for Umrah, I had a draft. This is the previous draft copy, so it's not the one that was rectified. The previous draft copy, and I showed it to Sheikh Hatim, and Sheikh Hatim, he goes, look, what you do, send me your updated soft copy, and I'll look at that. So then, because I had to print it out for him, so then I sent him that, and then he read through it, and then he mentioned some very useful remarks, and he comments, and alhamdulillah, it was very useful, very great with his time. And that was the first time I had someone that actually read it where I felt that they were
commenting on
really the substance of it. Yeah. So it's more like, okay, does your argument really flow here?
Yeah.
How you thought of this? What is this question? He gave this kind of very deep insight like that. And some of his notes were so useful that what I did was I just left the note in the footnote of what he mentioned and with his name, just to show it's not from me, right? So I read from him. So when I got that kind of approval, saying, okay, the argument is good, but he goes, look, you need to be more again, it's be more meticulous in your language, which was difficult because from English to Arabic, and first I'm writing in Arabic, and not just writing anything in Arabic, you're trying to make an argument in Arabic to be more watertight. So I did try that. I made the changes that he mentioned, and then we got for publication, we see what happens, right? But that process was a long process, and there's a lot of time where it was left, and I didn't touch it for a while, just do other projects. So what I would say to people that are want to do something like this, if you have good Arabic skills or good English skills, no problem. But you need to have good people around you. But those good people around you, not everyone is lucky. Like myself, I didn't just have people. You have to make connections. You have to get people to come and help you out. And then you kind of build those connections yourself. You have to have a good team around you if you want to do good research or have some publication specifically. Because the difference, one is when I'm writing, because when you're doing tweets, so you got maybe some social media platform and you're writing comments and stuff, that's all fine. Small clips, that's fine. But when you do it for publication and you want to be meticulous, from the draft copy to that, it's the most boring task, in my opinion. And it's the most difficult task, but it's the most necessary task, trying to get the draft into publication. Some people are very good at that. But that's why I think there's some brothers now that are helping people in doing this. I don't know if they want to be mentioned, so I'm not going to mention the name, but they've been very useful, not for this project, but some of the projects that they said that will be very helpful. So that's a major khidmah if you can get that. Maktaba Ismail is a major khidmah, you can get that. In terms of financing, which is also an issue, right? So it's all great, getting this done. Financing, we have to pay for it, depending on where you're going, but I had to pay for it myself. But alhamdulillah, the Maulana, he didn't give me permission just yet to say his name, so I'm not going to say it, but alhamdulillah, he was a Maulana, local Maulana, and he funded the cost for print. So that was very useful. In terms of the negotiation of profit, I don't know about that, honestly. People ask, I'm very ignorant regarding how business works. So if you're asking those questions, I don't know, maybe I'll tell you after. But in terms of me, it's this is a cost. Okay, I was going to give it, but this Maulana came and said, look, I'll fund the project. And, alhamdulillah, that worked out. But you may have to, if you look into publication, you may have to cough up money from yourself to get that done.
So struggles here, we're talking the necessary task of editing, having people to check over, commenting from experts in the field. I think a big part of that is when you're doing your literature review of any given topic and trying to research and find a gap in it, you will come across those experts, and then getting in contact with them is a necessary thing if you want to contribute. And that's in any topic. In academia, in Western academia, it's the same thing. I think that's quite important to know. In terms of the actual like writing stage now, so we've gone from the idea becoming something that you're researching on actively, and we've also talked about some of the struggles you came across while trying to publish. But in the actual planning stage, when you were thinking about, okay, how am I going to go about doing this? What kind of struggles did you face there?
So there's actually, I'll say one thing which is very important. So manhaj is important, and methodology. And so to do so, you need to engage with good scholars. And of course, not everyone has access to, muhaqqiqeen around them, right? And especially in the West. As I mentioned a few episodes before, I don't think it's at the fault necessarily of scholars, but because the lifestyle of how a graduate is meant to act, to basically perform in society, it's very difficult to have someone to be full-time researchers. You just don't have the positions. So we don't have that kind of surroundings here. So that's what I've noticed is that whenever I've done some sort of, I've written something up either in draft form, arguments, etc. When I kind of produce it we've got another work coming out soon, inshallah, on the topic of free mixing. So when it was trying to find, so there are like competent scholars that gave contributions and stuff, but a lot of the ulama are occupied more, rather than research, is more in communal acts, right? And which makes 100% sense, right? That's what the need of in the West is. So you have very few of those. So that's why something you have to kind of broaden out into other countries and try to find mashayikh and muhaqqiqeen that you can engage. So, sorry, I'm drifting off, right? But in terms of, so if you don't find those people, then you read good books. You look at the books, you look at how referencing is done, you look at styles, and you have to pick your style, because every book style is different, every author style is different. So you have to kind of see, okay, what style does it can I kind of correlate with, and I can kind of mimic into my thing. Also, when you read good research, you see like what are the general structure that they followed, and how much of that can I incorporate into my study. These are very important things to keep an eye out for. And so that was one thing in terms of manhaj. The second, whatever point I'm on now, second or third point, is one thing that we will struggle with is biases, right? And this is extremely important. We spoke about this before, but in Arabic they're called biases, tahayyuz. There's a book that I will get up, inshallah. I've just got it here. It's called At-Tahayyuz. By two scholars, Sheikh Ahmed Salim and Sheikh Amr Basyuni. Right, both of these scholars are highly competent scholars, and they've got this book which, as a title suggests, is called At-Tahayyuz. The full name is At-Tahayyuz wa dararuhu ala al-fiqh wal ma'rifah. Risalat al-hijab lit-tarifi namudajan. So this book, what it does is it talks about the harms of bias research. I'll upload this book onto the Telegram channel, right? Now, the topic at hand is a book called Al-Hijab by the Salafi Sheikh Al-Tarifi. And these two authors, their contention is that this Sheikh Tarifi is extremely biased when it comes to the topic of hijab. So what they do is they go through his arguments and they try to show his bias in that. And what is relevant to this discussion, forget, you can read the book, I think it's a very good book, right? But if you, in the beginning of the work, they have this section where they discuss tahayyuz, which is what do they mean by it? Because tahayyuz just means to hold on to certain ideas, right? But it's not necessarily negative. But tahayyuz in a negative form, they say the following. It's on page 20. I'll upload the book, inshallah. They say, وَوَاكِوَ الْعَمَرِ أن التحيز الذي نقصده هو التحيز المذموم. So what we mean by this kind of, or we just say bias here, is the condemnable type. What is that? وهو التحيز الذي يؤدي بالإنسان إلى درم اتباع الهوى السريع الخفي. It's the bias that results in a person following desire, either explicitly or in concealment. They don't give justice في وزن أقوال مخالفي وحججهم. They don't give justice in weighing up the position of their opponents and their evidences. ولا يراجع بحثه ويظن برأي قطعية ليس معه بينة على هذه القطعية. They think that whatever research they've come is definitive, and they don't give without any clear evidence of why it's definitive. So for example, there's اختلاف, but they'll just dismiss اختلاف. Oh, this is شاذ قول. This is not authentic. There's some rawi here is weak, and they'll just dismiss positions, which they normally won't do.
If it was their own position.
If it was own position, they'll be the most harsh. So they try to demonstrate all of this. They go, والتحيز هنا فوق أنه ضرب من اتباع الهوى فهو ضرب من ظلم والبغي أيضا. He goes, this is not just following desire. This is a form of oppression. Right? So this is something which is very important, because a lot of the research that you have, good researchers, etc., is that because we are all naturally have, and they mention this quite openly, they say, look, we all have biases. And nothing, it's not wrong. Like, for example, we can say we have a bias towards the Sahaba. But the bias towards Sahaba is because Allah has vouched for them.
It's a shara'i.
It's a shara'i bias, if you like, right? So if you present something to me and say, this Sahabi did X, Y, and I do ta'weel of it, I interpret and no, it could be because of this. You say, isn't that bias? Yes, but it's mandated bias. And then there's biases that we have because of our upbringing, our experience. A lot of the times when I don't travel much, right? I'm opposed to air travel. I think it's against the fitrah. Right? It's just for darura purposes we do travel, right? I hate traveling, right? It's qita'adu min al-adab, right? So I don't have that experience, but sometimes whenever the few rare instances I'm seen out of my house, right?
Your locality.
Yeah. I see stuff and it's surprising. And you kind of shocked. You're like, what's going on here? What they're playing at? That can, but then when you have to sit down and say, all right, wait 1 minute. Why is this wrong? And you think, oh, there isn't actually anything wrong with it. It's just something that I'm not used to. I'm not accustomed to.
It's a cultural difference to me.
And then if I was to give an opinion on that, initially, there will be, my biases will kick in. So therefore, we have to always try to kind of distance ourselves from our biases. And that could be because it's a position held by my sheikh. It could be a position held by my school of thought that I'm aligned to. It could be, sometimes it's just opinions. There's just an opinion that for some reason, I am just so...
Emotionally attached.
Yeah, I'm so emotionally attached to this position because of a bad experience I may have had. Or, for example, let's say me and you had a debate about a topic. And at the end of the debate, I was so strong on this position. But then later, now you couldn't, just say you didn't present the position accurately, but I was so strong, I thought, I'm not going to change the position. But then I go and debate with someone else and I think, oh shoot, you actually have evidence here. But I don't want to destroy my ego and come back to you and say, you know, man, you were right. So then I have a bias on a very specific issue. There's so much here, right? And sometimes we don't want the haqq to be on the mukhalif. So someone you don't like, they seem to be saying something that's more accurate in your opinion, but your sheikh, who you say is a much better person, doesn't agree, then you get challenged, right? And you have the ability to make this judgment, not that you're any old person. You have the ability to make a judgment this person is true or got evidences, but you don't give due justice to that. Or you don't present the opponent argument properly. You do a caricature of the version, right? So, oh, they say this is allowed or because, you know, they follow their hawa or they don't have any dalil or they use this evidence, but they have a set of evidence that we don't engage it.
Yeah.
So this book, At-Tahayyuz of Shaykh Ahmed Salim and Shaykh Ahmed Basyuni, they kind of do that with the book of Tarifi, and they kind of demonstrate this throughout. It's a large work, and they go through the whole topic of hijab, and they try to show how his biases have kind of made him misrepresent tafsir of verses, misrepresent ayat, misrepresent madahib, misrepresent history, misrepresent lugha, right? So they got the bias is very deep. And that's what they try to demonstrate in this. And how selective quotation, which is another form, right? Because it's not, one is a person lies, one is selective quotation. So what happens is, let's say, for example, I've made my argument. I think the Muslim Imam al-A'zam of al-Harithi is not reliable. I've given my argument, I've tried to check it up. Now, what if some evidence comes out tomorrow, which is to the contrary to my conclusion? There will be naturally for me difficult. I'll publish a book on this, all right? I don't want to backtrack from a book, right? I don't want to do that. So that's where the challenge will come in. That, okay, how do I react to this? And then I have to be balanced. Is it fair? If it's fair, then maybe I have to put a question mark. If it's not, then I'll refute. No problem. Doesn't mean I have to accept any criticism. But that's where the biases kick in. So that's very important. Any research you carry out, right? And you want to do true research. If you're doing like a bio, you're doing something, okay, no problem. You don't do proper research what the truth is on a given topic or which usul is more accurate or which historical point is more accurate. What are you trying to do?
Well, you're making an argument.
in any genre, right? You're making an argument about hadith's authenticity. This scholar says authenticity is weak. You want to make a judgment call, then you have to present all arguments in the best, what they call steel manning. You want to steel man everyone's arguments and then provide your conclusion. But the problem is that usually when you steel man the opponent's arguments, you realize that if it's from competent scholars, it has weight.
Yeah.
It's rare to have competent scholars holding a view and to be totally nonsense.
And then it becomes difficult to say, to dismiss it.
And you have to accept there's a khilaf.
Yeah.
So when it's all great if I would say it's me versus you can say, well, who are you? Right? You know, what have you done in life? Right? You can dismiss it, no problem. But now you go against someone like he's an imam. Right? But this is said by, Tahawi. Does he not know? Right? So it's possible. It's possible that an imam got it wrong. There are examples. But as a general rule, if you have imams that are holding positions and you give due right to the evidences, the average alim will find it hard to dismiss these views. There are examples where you can dismiss them, but not all the time. That's the fear sometimes with steel manning, because when you do it properly, the person will say, well, your response doesn't fully respond to their point.
Are you even convinced with your own argument?
And that's true. That's what the essentially goes. So what is easier is to make a straw man or make a caricature version of the arguments and then refute it. So that's very important that you do so. Be fair to the evidence in front of you.
And I guess like at the beginning of any kind of project that a person starts, it has to be with that level of open-mindedness that I'm coming with this with a certain assumed bias that I think I know what's going on, but halfway through your research, you may come across a certain bit of writing or a certain piece of literature that changes your entire perspective on the entire issue. Yeah. And then you have to then backtrack on your own thing.
Yeah, and these are like topics we were talking about, like I mentioned, foundations of Islam.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about like an usul or a fara' or a lughawi point or the authenticity of a hadith where scholars have differed over, and you're trying to, and depending on where you're at in your journey, how much you can actually say a statement of. Like these are not books that I specially picked for this episode. It's just literally books I was reading today, and I thought just to show people, like not reviews either, right? But just show you something. This is a book I just started. It's called Al-Ideologia Al-Madhabiyya by Sheikh Abdullah Al-Khizzi. And this is a academic work on Ja'd ibn Dirham. I'll put the picture up of it, right? There's no soft copy of this. It's a new book come out. And here he makes a point as well. Is like, Ja'd ibn Dirham is this early heretic, right? So it's a historical analysis. So what he tries to do here, he tries to go right to the earliest sources that talk about Ja'd ibn Dirham, and then how the narrative of Ja'd ibn Dirham develops over time. I've just started it. I don't have a view of if it's good or not. So far, I've just read the methodology, sounds quite sound, but I don't know what his conclusion is going to be. I'm not doing a review, that's why. But I'm saying is, so here what he's trying to do, and he argues in the beginning saying, I am contributing to this field. I'm going to bring sources in here that have not been analyzed before. These are previous studies that have been done. These previous studies have not done the tahqiq that I've done. So he's going to present all of that together, and then he makes a big point of saying, this is not a question about the haqq and the non-haqq of Islam. It's a historical question, which people then turn into a religious question. Right? That exactly. So if someone said Ja'd ibn Dirham started X, Y, and Z, and he goes, I question that. He agrees he's heretic, but I'm saying is, he goes, but if I question that, that's not a question about Islam. So he makes this distinction. So that's where a lot of the research we're talking about. We're not saying, my tahqiq has proven that there's actually 6 salahs or 4 salahs in a day, right? We're not talking about that kind of research. And those who don't know the field, they probably think, what is this guy talking about? Contribution. But those who study ulum know that there's many aspects of Islamic sciences that develop, and there'll be some aspects they have a lack of tahrir, which is lack of elaboration on. There'll be gaps in some things that have not been discussed, and there's some things which there have been mistakes because of misquotation and misunderstanding, and then a scholar will come in and make those kind of corrections. So this other work that I've got here, this is from Sheikh Hatim, right? This is his commentary on Muqaddim ibn Salah. So I was reading it this morning because I teach Muqaddim ibn Salah, just going through it. This is called At-Takmil wal-Idah li Maqasid ibn Salah. There's no soft copy of this either, right? So it's supposed to be a 5-volume work. This is only the first volume has come out. You read this, right, and you read other commentaries of Ibn Salah, you see that even the genre of commentaries differs depending on what you're trying to do. So when he's doing a commentary of Muqaddim ibn Salah, what he's doing is that each point that Ibn Salah is mentioning, he's going right back to the earlier sources analyzing them, comparing to what Ibn Salah said, and providing rich content. Whereas other commentators of Ibn Salah, what they may do, or commentators of books, they would just say that our job is just to explain what Ibn Salah is saying. That's totally different. Nothing wrong with that. But this would be what a contribution would be. That would be explained. Both are commentaries of Ibn Salah, but they can be radically different depending on how you approach it.
One's focusing on the actual text, one's focusing on the subject points.
100%. But then even in essence, I would say that. That would be fair to say like that,
Yeah. And I think there, that open-mindedness is what's very important. I mean, I mentioned this before. I'm going to say again, like, just to elaborate on that if we're not open-minded and we are very biased in the way we approach our research, then we won't actually deepen our understanding of the field. So we have to lose those biases, or at least acknowledge them, especially when we're talking about our methodology, writing them down. Like, I'm researching a topic in fiqh, I am Hanafi, I'm a staunch Hanafi, and I'm from the Deobandi school, so I have biases from the Deobandi school, right? All of those biases, you list them down, so that when you come across different literature in the topic, those biases are taken account for, and you can analyze it with a sound mind.
I'll also say that if that's who you are and that's your ability, there's no problem in that, right? Like, when I'm writing something, I'm a Hanafi, so I'll be writing within a Hanafi tradition, right? Unless there is something which is, a modern issue where there's not a clear position on the madhab, or later Hanafis themselves have taken other positions outside the madhab, then I don't have it. Then there's less limitations. But the thing is, we start as Hanafi. But if you're training, and that's what I'd say, it depends where you're in your journey. If you're a madrasa student, right, and then what you know is what your asatidza taught you, and you're kind of writing, notes in class and trying to write something else, your job is just to be a representative of the madrasa that you associate with. There's no problem in that. But of course, that would what you have to be careful of is your tone then. Because if you're representing one school that you're very specifically on, then that's fine. You said this is what we hold, but then you have to watch your tone when you're discussing opposition, because knowledge of khilaf is a different field to knowledge of to writing about something what you believe to be correct. What I mean by this is, if someone asks me, what's the ruling of this is one that we do I mentioned in class, what's the ruling of praying Jum'ah before Zawal? Right? So I would say the praying of Jum'ah before Zawal is not allowed. This is the Hanafi position. But if someone comes to me and says, but in the Hanbali madhab, many of them have said quite explicitly that Jum'ah is Eid, so you can pray before Zawal. How should we react to that khilaf? That's a different knowledge now. Because this is our reaction to a khilaf versus me knowing what the position I am holding on to.
Yes.
That's a different field. So now that requires me to say, okay, I need to know the Hanbali madhab. Is this actually the Hanbali position? What is their khilaf on this? Did Imam Ahmed say this? Has fatwa been given on this? It's a different ball game, right? But what happened? But just because I've been taught that it can't be before, I'll just tell you it can't be before. That's my learning. But I can't go and start doing inkar and reject that position unless I know the khilaf. And that's what happens when someone's holding a position. It's fine. If that's what your current state and you like this state should be in, no problem, right? And if you go somewhere beyond that, then no problem. It all comes down to where you... And there's many examples of, because people say Deobandi, the way some of the phrase as such somehow being restrictive. No, read the research of Deobandi scholars. Read books, for example, like Mufti Taqi Usman's Fiqh al-Bayu', or his
very
book on...
Very
into madhab, especially because he says in terms of finance issues, right? Yeah. Read his Usul Ifta wa Adabuhu, go to the section of Fatwa al-Madhab al-Ghayr. Read like even intra-madhab where positions have been challenged, mainstream positions. Mufti Abdul Malik has got a famous fatwa research that he did on the topic of local citing versus global citing, the way he challenges mainstream Hanafi positions. These are all within the Deobandi school. So this kind of sometimes, I think it's it's maligned that, these are Deobandis, strict Deobandis or something like that. Then I think sometimes we have an image in mind that kind of represents this. But if you actually go read the research of the Islamic Fiqh Academy of India, that's predominantly Deobandi scholars. Nadwis were predominantly Deobandi scholars. Read their research, right? And you'll see that there's this wide reading, wide scope of research.
And to not be scared of that.
Yeah. Because
I think a lot of students of knowledge in the West that adhere to a particular ideal or particular school or affiliate themselves to a particular sheikh or madrasa, they have a fear of going outside of that fold because they'll be kind of excommunicated.
Again, the only reason why I would just not push back on that, the only reason I would say is that I don't mind that if that's your competence, that's your ability.
Yeah.
Right? We all have our limitations. So I don't go and meddle into topics that I think I don't know about, right? This is where I'm going to stop. If you start asking me questions about something which say, your tradition says this, how do you respond to, let's say some point in tariq, for example, like history says you claim this in history, but reality is this. I'll be like, okay, I don't know the ability of that. So I'll stick to what I know, and you go discuss with someone else. If that's what your sheikh says, and you say, I don't know, the only problem you have is that when you are at one side saying doing i'tiraf, you're accepting that you have shortcomings, but at the same time you have this bravery to go and condemn others. Let your sheikh do that. Right? So the condemnation part, if you're saying, I don't know, I'm a muqallid on this topic, my sheikh said, no problem. We're muqallids in many issues. Right? As in fiqh, we're muqallids, right? The Hanafi madhab, that's how we present ourselves. But if there's something that you want to go condemn, then let the sheikh do so, not you. You following?
Yeah.
When I say muqallid here, I'm not using it, I'm using it in a generic sense of any topic that you're doing taqleed of. So it could be whether it's a grading of hadith, whether it comes to fiqh masala, it comes to usul, whatever it is. That's what I'm using in the broad sense. Or even manhaj issues, political issues. I just do taqleed of this sheikh, he told me to vote, to not to vote, I don't do it. That's what I mean by that. So if you hold a position based upon that, and you shouldn't be one debating it. The sheikh should be one debating it, if you want anyone to debate it.
Definitely.
We can't digress onto other topics, but you get the point, yeah.
Just to wrap up here as well, because I think we've taken a lot of time, and we don't want to take too much. خوفا من الإطالة. Any kind of further general advice that you would give to a person who would want to start this? I mean, we've given a lot of advice, but for someone who's looking at this and thinking, okay, what's one piece of advice that you could give them that could take away from this, and they could go and say, okay, that helped me a lot. What's that one piece of advice?
All right. So what I would say is you need to observe where you are in your current scholarly journey. Your talabu ilm, right? Where exactly you are. If you are in your stage of learning Arabic language, then your primary focus should be on learning Arabic language, gain competency and be able to read Arabic. If you're in the process of saying, I've done my alamiyya, but I want to carry out research, then I would say, first things first, make sure that you're doing a significant hours of reading a day. When you're doing a significant hours of reading a day, then see what exactly are your talents, right? What exactly are you good at? Are you a person that's very good at articulating things? Are you a good person formulating arguments? Are you a good at person making diagrams and presentations, whatever it is, right? Are you good at giving bayans, whatever it is? What are you good at? And you try to maximize your talents and write or do stuff based upon that. If you want to go into the field of saying, I want to contribute to Islamic ulum, then I would say read the works of scholars that have attempted this and see what is required, and then see if you have the ability to do so. The chances are, if you're coming new into it, it'll be hard to do so, depending on what field you're in. Like some fields like ulum al-hadith, there's a bit more easier to contribute to. The reason I say this is because of the sheer amount of books that have been published for the first time. So there's a lot to kind of engage with, easier to access, the softwares are kind of made for you. And the last thing I would say, hopefully the last thing, is that use everything at your disposal. What do I mean by this is, and this point should be right at the beginning, if you can somehow do this right, that use everything at your disposal. That means use Maktabu Shamila, use PDFs. When people say stuff like, I can't read PDFs, but then you're depriving yourself of knowledge. Unless you've got unlimited money. If you've got unlimited money, unlimited space, and even then it's hard to buy books. You get out of stock, what are you going to do, right? So you have to... use everything at disposal. If that's PDFs, Shamila softwares, people you discuss with. Just recently I discovered ChatGPT. So if you rephrase stuff, not to do research, right? Of course, right? But you can use it still. If you want to ask it questions, and then you can kind of see how to formulate it. And even use everything at your disposal. Yeah. Right? Don't plagiarize, but use everything at your disposal. Yeah. And remember that the purpose behind your research is to attain what is closest to truth. Right? That's your goal. It's not what my hawa says, my desire says, not what this person said, that person said. I want to present this issue and hopefully it'll come under my scale of hasanat. So I can say to Allah, I've done something, which is a contribution open for to attain some sort of truth. That should be the main goal that a person is attaining the whole way. If that's your maqsad, right, then the issue of bias, inshallah, should kind of be put aside. But in terms of practice, use everything at your disposal. and then you start your work.
Sure.
Right? And then as you kind of persevere, you kind of see where you're at, where this is going to lead you to, and allow it to take you. Right? Whatever process taking you, you say, okay, I kind of notice I've got a bit of a knack for usul. I might want to go into this. Or, I find this too difficult. You know what I'm going to do? I think that there needs to be a simplified book, usul al-fiqh. I think that we need to write a English summary of this. Or I think whatever you kind of takes you down, you let it go, because we are in dire need in the West of good, solid researchers in every field. We don't have many historians. We don't have many proper political analysts. We have a lot of people that are armchair experts, right? It's like I can speak about politics and it will sound great for the untrained eye, but I'm just speaking out my backside. I haven't got a clue what I'm saying, right? So I can, we need actual experts sit there, they do the hard work. They go through the necessary books, all right? They do the reading, they do the research, and they kind of produce stuff. We're in dire need of that in all Islamic sciences. That's the basis we should work off. We don't have that in the West. So whatever you're doing, don't try to be someone else's, don't try to copy someone else's research because they've gone into something. Go into it, see what interests you, and then dedicate yourself to it. And like I say, it's a marathon. So we're not talking about a 2-3 year stint. You want to make meaningful impact, we're talking about decades in the field, right? Some of these scholars you probably never heard of throughout the whole 20s, etc. No one knew who they were, right? Many of the times, only the smaller circles people kind of knew of them. They got popular later because they spent that time cultivating knowledge, building up the expertise, building up their connection, writing, failing, maybe even getting refuted and rehashing their works, and then they finally come to the fruition. So it's a long, long journey. Many times you'll start to feel that you're incompetent. It's a waste of time. This is shaitani waswasa. You carry on, you persevere. It's a long, long game, right? And you have to be in the long run to hopefully see the fruits of it, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan. And there we end. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq to do some khair for the ummah, contribute to this ummah in some way, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for us and the viewers to take as much as we can from this podcast and act upon what has been mentioned. وآخر الدعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وعلى أصحابه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.